Ngeba Sojola here. Now, to really understand the timeline and the events that led to what is known as the 7 October 2023 Hamas attack on Israel, right? Which has come to be known as the Al-Aqsa, right? Flood attack, right? Now, you need to understand what happened in 2021, right? On the day of Ramadan, right? When there were Palestinian worshippers who locked themselves inside the mosque. Now, the IDF decided to respond in a violent way, right? And to handle the situation by harassing the worshippers there, right? So the IDF stormed inside the mosque and started beating up people, abusing people, and kicking them out, right? This resulted in a small skirmish between Hamas and Israeli Defense Force, which started some airstrikes on Gaza, right? So Hamas started to plan out a revenge attack, right, on Israel, right, which eventually got to be conducted on the 7th of October 2023, right? Now, this attack has come to be known as the Al Aqsa flood, right? It started at about, I'd say, 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, right? With a barrage, right? A multiple attack of rockets, right? That are basically homemade. Now, we must understand the strategy that Hamas is employing by um, discarding or releasing or shooting the amount of rockets, right? Homemade rockets that don't have a guidance system, right? That don't even have a proper target, right? Why these rockets are being used. Now, at about 6:30 in the morning, right? About 5,000 to about 7,000 rockets were released from the Gazan territory right into the territory of Israel, right? Now, this was done to number one, flood as the air defense system, right? There are two particular air defense systems that Israel uses. The first one is known as THAAD, right? And the second one, this main one, known as the Iron Dome, right? Now, for the Iron Dome to function, right, it costs about $50,000 per missile, which shoots down the rockets which Hamas releases from the Gaza Strip to Israel, right? Now, when we look at the rockets which Hamas makes, they are homemade rockets. Some of the rockets cost as less as $200, right? Some of them cost right up to about $1,000, right? And $2,000, right? Now, this is what you must understand with the economics of war, right? It is very expensive for the Iron Dome to work. Yes, the Iron Dome functions very well, right? It hits about 95% of the targets that it identifies, right? It is able to protect, I'd say, a radius of about 120 to 150 kilometers, right, in a dome like fashion, right? It is quite an efficient system, right? But it's quite an expensive system to run, right? So, number one, when you shoot out 5,000 to about 7,000 rockets, right, you fundamentally overwhelm the system, right? And it becomes very costly to run the system, right? So it basically takes a $50,000 guided missile from the Iron Dome to take down a rocket from Gaza, which costs about $500, right? So these are the economics of war, right? So you just overflooding them so that it costs them a lot of money to run that system, right? So because you have overwhelmed the Iron Dome system, right? It cannot cover everything, right? It's believed about 400 to about 800 rockets actually eventually landed in the Israel territory, right? Which basically overwhelmed the Iron Dome system. Now, another strategy which was employed in the Al Aqsa flood attack, right, is a very creative one is the usage of paragliders to carry out, I would say, air assaults on Israel, right? Now, on the 7th October, there was a music festival known as uh, Supernova Music Festival, right? Basically, that happens close to the Gazian borders, right? So Hamas took advantage of this by training its fighters to be able to fly paragliders, right, which were able to bypass the Israeli Defense Force and sensors, right, and basically be able to reach this venue where the music festival happened, right? It eventually happened that about over 200, the exact number was about 222 hostages were taken back to Gaza by the Palestinians or by Hamas. And over, I think, 300 people. No, the attack resulted in about 1,400 Israelis, right, being killed in the attack. Now, if you look at the previous attack, there has never been an attack of this magnitude, right? And a breach of this magnitude. The way they were able to breach the Israeli hectic surveillances, right? And the number of people which were kidnapped and taken as hostages, and the amount of people which eventually died in the process 1,400. Now, this is quite a high number, right? Especially for Palestinians, the highest number ever that they themselves have experienced in engaging in war with Israel, right? So the attack was successful in that regard, right? And they eventually were able to conduct the attack, right? Which resulted in what is known as the first phase of the Defense Force um, military attacks, right? So basically, the first phase contained about the bombing or the air campaign or the airstrikes from the Israeli Air Defense Force, right? So they started bombing a lot of military installations and command communication centers in the Gaza Strip, which belong to specifically Hamas.